Hello everyone, welcome to the TSS. In this class we are going to discuss about JavaScript functions with arguments, right? In the earlier class I just introduce you about functions. What is function? Why to use functional programming, right? And one little example I had explained to you. Now we will see the functions with arguments, right? Now, so in the earlier class what we did is we just, let me go to the last class. This is the last class and this is the example which I had explained in a last class. It's simple, just I am hard coded all these values. Hard coded means manually given all these values. Okay, so function simple add and the code block is like this: 10, 20 and result is 30 and the result is displayed onto the console. That is the functionality, right? And wherever we want that functionality we will call that function with that name add. Then this function will execute, that code block will execute and result will be displayed, right? And please observe that add on the parentheses there is no arguments list is there, it's empty. Here also at the time of defining the function itself it is empty. Okay, so now what happens is the requirements may come. So if you want to perform addition with some different numbers, so here it is 10 and 20. Every time if you call this name, every time this 10 and 20 will be added and the result will be displayed as 30. So any number of times if you call this function, the same result will be displayed and numbers won't change because we hard coded this code block. Okay, and now if you don't want this 10 plus 20 but you want your own numbers to add, your own user given numbers to add and then display the result, then to fulfill that requirement the concept of arguments comes into the picture. Okay, so what we will do is functions with arguments. Okay, so what we will do is for enabling the user to pass the arguments, to pass the data or to pass the numbers whatever he wants to add, then we need to use the functions with arguments concept, right? Let us see the syntax first. There is no much difference, friends. That function key name is same, the name will be the same, the function name, and then arguments, right? So in the parentheses arguments goes like this: arguments 1, argument 2, argument 3. If you want to add some 4 5 numbers, then 4 5 numbers will be defined here. Okay, parameters will be defined here and then the code block begins. Okay, so let us discuss with an example. Function add parenthesis open. Now this time I am defining num1 and num2. That means number 1 and number 2. This means what is, so when at the time of calling this add function, it prompts the user to give their own numbers. Okay, that is the meaning of these two parameters, right? At the function definition itself I am defining the add with some 2 numbers in this parenthesis arguments list, right? So for what means, so it will accept at the time of calling 2 numbers from the user. User can give any number he wants. He may give 10 or he may give 30, he may give 90. Any 2 numbers this function will take input from the user. That is the meaning, remember. And then the code block, in the code block I had modified something. In the earlier we had hard coded like this, 10 and 20. So 10 will be stored in A, 20 will be stored in B, and these A and B will be added, and the added result is stored in the result, and the result is displayed in the console, right? Now here you see, after prompting the user to give numbers, here the given numbers will be stored in num1 and num2. Let me explain. So if you want to call the function which are defined with arguments, then you need to call add 4 and 5. This time this 4 and 5 who will give means the user will give as he like. So if he wants to add 4 and 5, then he need to give 4 comma 5. So what will happen behind the screens, I will explain, friends. Add 4 comma 5. If the user gives like this, the 4 will go and store into the num1 variable, and 5, the 5 will go and store in num2 variable. These are all internal functionality, okay? And here you need to distinguish between the most frequently used words in the functional programming world, that is parameters and arguments, okay? So both are interchangeably used by some people, right? So let me give you some distinction between parameters and arguments. So argument is whenever you call a function, the data provided here is called argument, and after giving this data, this is called 4 is called argument. And what is parameter is at the time of function definition which we have given this num1. This num1 is the parameter. It is called a dummy variable. It will, the 4 which is called an argument will be stored inside this num1 parameter. But here and there people are intermixing these parameters and arguments both, and it is no problem. Anyway, you will go whichever way you want. You can name this as an arguments also, because the whatever arguments you are giving here, that arguments only come here, okay, here, and store in this num1. Then people are calling these also an arguments, and these are also arguments, no problem. So the concept is important. So the 4 will be the user input and 5 will be the another user input. You need to know the mechanism behind it. After giving the data as arguments, these data will go and store in this corresponding, the 4 comma, the first argument will be go and store in the first parameter only, first number variable only, and 5 will go and store in num2 only, not in num1. So positions are important. So that class is also there. Positional arguments, types of arguments class is also there. At that time I will explain to you. So 4 and 5 will go and store in num1 and num2. That is the point which you need to remember. And then what? So eventually that number 1 contents will be stored in A variable, and number 2 contents, that is 5, will be stored in B variable, and then the result A plus B will be processed and the result is stored in the result variable, and then the result will be outputted onto the console. So this is the functions with arguments concept, friends. So what is the use of functions with arguments? The usage is it will prompt the user to give their own desired data, that is the input kind of thing, okay, and the process will be processed with the block of statements, that is called process, and then the output will be given, that is called output, okay. So in the earlier no matter how many times you call this function, the same logic will be performed. So 10, 20 and 30 is the result. 10, 20 addition between this 10 and 20 and the result 30 will be performed and output to the console. No matter 1000 times you call, this is the 30 is the output. And if you want your own numbers apart from 30 or 20, like say some you need to add some 28 plus 94, then this function is useless. Okay, even though it is function, it is useless because you don't define the arguments. So for fulfilling that purpose, there is function with arguments concept. We can make use of arguments like this num1 and num2. At the function definition itself you need to do it. Let us do it in the functions.js only. Just I will add from first onwards I will do, otherwise you will confuse. Add. So this is the function keyword. Add is my custom name to the code of block which I am going to write. Add in, this is the parenthesis list. So this arguments list, right? So I am num1. Not only num1, you can name whatever name you want, right? So for the simplicity I am taking num1 and num2 because the numbers are variable names. Those should be very meaningful, friends, remember. And then I am taking where a. So now this time I am not going to put 10 or 20 directly because I prompted the user to enter num1. So that num1 will be, if user inputs as 5 or 9 or 18, that particular number will come and store in this num1. Okay, it is called a parameter. See here, parameter, and inside it acts as a dummy variable num1. So that num1 should be stored in where a. Okay, then where b num2, and then where result is equal to a plus b, then console.log of what? Result. That result should be printed to console. Now what we had defined, num1 and num2, two arguments. That means at the time of function definition itself we should define these things also. So this function will accept two numbers from the user, and the logic is declared here. So num1 which has user provided will be in turn stored in the a variable, number 2 will be stored in the b variable, and some summation has performed, and then result is stored in the result variable, and the result is printed to the console, right? So now you can see, add, I am calling the function. Okay, to execute this bit of code, then we need to call the function. Calling function means what? Just give the name. Then now if you call like this, okay, and save. Now clear. Now if I try to execute this one, here you can see none means not a number, because I didn't given any inputs to it. That's why it is giving the output like this, because the parenthesis list is empty. I am not giving any number here. That's why even though the calling activity takes place, because I didn't give any number, then no numbers will be passed here and here. If no number is passed, the internal logic doesn't function. That's why none is come. So if you place your pointer here, now I am placing my pointer here, the pop-up is telling you can read that function add num1. Okay, num1 any, num2 any, that is the parameters which I defined at the time of function definition itself. Okay, it is helping us. So this add is not an empty argument list. You need to provide two numbers here. Our ID is helping us. Now you can say 14 comma some 16. Now the 14 which I had given here, that is one argument. The 16 which I have mentioned here is a second argument. The data is provided by the user, and what will happen after giving it means the 14 will go and store in num1 variable, and 16 is go and store in num2 variable or num2 parameter, right? And then this num1 and num2 eventually will be assigned to A and B, and this function this particular process will take place, and the console result will be displayed onto the console, right? That is the basic understanding of the functions with arguments, friends. Let us now save this file and then now execute it. Here you can see the 30 came, 16 because 14 plus 16 is 30. Okay, now if you want say 56 plus 48, if you want the sum of these two numbers, then save it, execute the function. Now you can see 104. How much flexibility it is now with the functions with arguments concept. Earlier there is not this much of flexibility, not even user is not possible to give the inputs also. Okay, just if you call that add, that predefined functionality will be executed with the hard coded values. Now we had made the user to input the values whatever you want to the function, and with the user given input the processing will be takes place, then the output will get as per the user given input. Okay, now next you can call whichever number times whatever number times you need. Some say this time I will give 248 comma 356. I want this. Okay, I want this. I want both because this calling is within the same file itself. Then the interpreter will execute this 11th line and then execute 13th line also. So here you can understand I had written this logic once, but I had used it here 11th line one time and 13th line two times. Okay, just what a smart way of doing the things, friends. Okay, let us now here you can see the same output 104 for this, and for this the result is 604, and you can go on calling the function like this. Here now I will give some this much of big number and this much of big numbers I will give. Save. Now node, here you can see 1 2 3 3 times the function is executed with different number of user input numbers and performed the addition. The output is given in the console. Now here also 1 2 3, I didn't write all this code again and again. Imagine if you want to do the addition operation for these two things. Okay, if there is no functional concept, then you need to write all this code here also. Now with the advantage of functions, we are doing like this. Just we need to call the function name, the underlying functionality will be executed for you. Just you need to call it and provide whichever data you need, right? So that is the concept, friends. And in the next class we will discuss about functions with return statements, friends. Till then, bye bye. Yours Viras signing off. Thank you for listening.